Quests, the backbone of RuneScape lore and storytelling. Throughout the game's history, quests have been used as a structure for unlocking content, introducing characters, and bringing stories to life in the world of Gielinor. However, the development of RuneScape's story has changed over the years. Ever since the Elder Gods storyline, RuneScape has been focused on telling a singular story through not just quests, but weaving other content into the lore. From the accidental fletching and firemaking update, to the entirety of 4.4 and 3, the story of RuneScape has stretched beyond quests. Yet despite this singular storytelling focus, there are quite a few storylines that lay dormant, empty, and unfinished. 4 stories still need to conclude. Mysteries of the 5th Age still need to be resolved. While I personally like the idea of a main story for the game, I do think it's important that we resolve some of the more important storylines the game still has. What's up, everyone? This is Destroyer229, and welcome to the Hotspot. Unlike the previous episode, we're not going to be going over a specific update that could come to the game. Rather, we're going to have a discussion on the unfinished quest lines that the game still has. Using the RuneScape wiki as our guide, this video will be split into 2 parts. The first is to go over the quest series listed on the official wiki, and why I only mentioned 4 stories in the intro. The second is to summarize the 4 series and go over possible ways that could be expanded on, as well as reasons why they may not have had a continuation thus far. We aren't going to make an old-fashioned theory walkthrough in this video, since that's up to the JMods to decide how these quests will resolve. We're just going to go over various ideas and themes that could be expanded on. Our goal also isn't to resolve every possible mystery or conflict. We aren't going to deal with the demon civil war on Infernus, or discover the mysteries of Zhao Talk before continuing the main storyline. No. We can still have dangling plot threads to pick up on. We just want to have some of the core conflicts or lesser mysteries resolved. So, let's begin. So let's start by asking what I mean by an unresolved questline. An unresolved questline is a series of 2 or more quests that does not have a definitive ending. These quests have to have an overarching theme, along with a recurring antagonist or goal to uncover. These are also not character-specific. Characters may be recurring, but their stories aren't the entirety of the questline. For example, the Cave Goblin storyline ends with the Chosen Commander, but Xanix's story continues well beyond this quest finale. That doesn't mean that there is a Xanix questline though, so the quests must be dealing with some other issue beyond one character's motivations. So given this information, the 4 unresolved questlines we'll be discussing are Desert, Gnome, the Elemental Workshop, and Penguins. Now I know some people will argue cases for other questlines listed on the wiki, so let's go over all the questlines there in order and explain why I don't consider the questline unresolved. Dalrith is a perfect example of a character-driven storyline. There's no large overarching theme with this quest series, it's just stop demons from destroying the world! Oddly enough, the second quest doesn't even have much to do with Dalrith. It's more like the Silverlight quest series more than anything. And we stop Dalrith and Demon Slayer, and that's about it. These are finished quest series. Their main conflicts have been resolved, and while we could expand on some characters like Bill Teach or the Fairy Queen, these quests already had their conclusions, and any expansion would likely just be in a more current storyline. Honestly, one could make a good argument about adding Camelot to our list here. The only thing really holding the series back is that there really isn't an overarching narrative. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table showed up from, now, Terragard, and they've been accosted by Morgan Le Fay. But there's no big goal for them or anything they want to do. They're just waiting to go back to where they came from, and so they have no urgency to do anything. Nor is Morgan really plotting anything that needs to be stopped. A new quest could theoretically be added to give these characters agency, but as of now, they're more just there. Just like the pirates and fairies, the elf storyline was concluded with the major conflict being resolved. King Lathis and the mourners have been stopped, the elves have their home again, and Ardoin can begin healing. Similar to the Camelot questline, the ogres don't really have an overarching plotline. It's more that there's something happening around Jagex or Uglog that you have to help with the problem there. There's no threat or bad guy to stop, and for the ogres, that's perfectly fine. Myarkea are a finished questline, just like the elves, pirates, and fairies before them. This is the exact same issue as the ogres. There's no overarching story or antagonist regarding the troll quests. It's more just odd jobs or tasks that you're asked to help out with, usually from either Burnt Meat or My Arm. Another controversial omission, but the Fremennik line is the same as the Ogre and Troll questlines. Each Fremennik island needs to have some issue resolved, and while there is an overarching theme of reuniting the different Fremennik clans, beyond fighting Dagonoths, there's little that's really uniting them. In fact, you could argue that Heroes Welcome caps off this series, as a V could have been seen as the uniting force of the Fremennik tribes. And Heroes Welcome isn't even technically part of this series. These are completed series, no need for direct continuations. Although more things to do in both Kelegrim and Dorgesh Khan would be really nice, but that's an entirely different discussion. Weirdly enough, this feels more like the Sisla questline, as the series basically just becomes that. The Temple Knights as an organization fall under the character-driven storyline problem, where despite being an organization, they're more like a tool to use for various series to utilize, rather than a force in and of itself to delve into. Granted, them being Zerosian was a nice twist in a Xanadra's quest, and more can be delved into that in the future, but again, that's not what our discussion today is. These all fall under the category of being character only, plus 2 of these are without a central recurring antagonist to rally against. A double whammy for all of these. Both of these are fully completed stories, with Summer mostly being a 2-parter to introduce the corporeal beast. This one is a technicality, but it's simply the setup of a thieves guild in Lumbridge, brought together through various mini-quests. It's technically fully completed, though I struggle to call it a quest series. Another fully completed series, which was also the intent back when it was released, which was nice. I'm not sure why these are included, since they aren't technically quests, but they are also just a series of short stories bound to each other by being in Demonheim. Honestly, not too dissimilar to the Fremennik series in structure, all things considered. Skipping a bit to lump the signature heroes together, these two are also just character-driven. Ozea's quests could be considered to be part of the Desert series, but Ariane doesn't really have a series she could cling on to. She was used well in the Elder God season, so there's that. I have zero idea why these are even considered to be quest series, but they're there, I guess. On a personal note, I would love to see a further expansion of the Eastern lands, as we have plenty of island chains left to reach ourselves. But for our discussion today, the series lacks multiple quests and is for the most part complete. There's more that could be explored with your crew, which can happen in the Skull and beyond, but as far as the main conflict is concerned, everything in the arc was wrapped up pretty tightly. Another character-driven quest series, and a holiday one to boot. I suppose there could be more that could be added, but with the change in direction in holiday events, this one's likely to just be considered complete. So now that we've gone over why we aren't covering certain series, let's get into the quests that should be wrapped up. As stated before, we have 4 series that need to have their storylines finished: the Desert, the Gnomes, the Elemental Workshop, and the Penguins. And we'll start with the Penguins. The Penguin series is considered one of the more light-hearted series of quests, with its first installment being Cold War in 2007. The series would have 3 more quests, with Hunt for Red Rocktober, Some Like It Cold, and Back to the Freezer, with the last update being on February 27th, 2017. The point of the quest series is that our allies of the PBJ are monitoring the activities of Pescaline Pax, and his goal to rule the world, though it usually involves some shenanigans and on-the-nose references, more so than other quests. At first, I wasn't going to be including the Penguins in this analysis, because the development of the Penguin series was different compared to other quests. The Penguin storyline was never meant to be a serious storyline being developed. It was intended to be more like a Saturday morning cartoon, where the bad guy has his evil plan of the week that needs to be stopped. There wasn't meant to be a huge overarching theme, but rather just be incredibly silly and filled with references, like the very apparent references to Hunt for Red October in Doctor Who. But quest development has shifted since that information was given, and so now the Penguins are just kind of there, without actually doing anything. But unlike the Camelot series, there is an active antagonist with an active goal that still needs to be stopped. So how can a series that wasn't ever serious be finished? Well, the biggest hurdle is that if we wanted to stop the Penguins for good, it may necessitate the release of Acheron, the frozen continent far to the north. We need access to the motherland, and more specifically, the city of Palingrad. Perhaps with a penguin resistance group led by Ping and Pong, we could start some sort of penguin civil war, which would destabilize Pescaline Pax's father, the Pescalians' rule. Of course, we don't necessarily need to go all the way to Acheron for this, and a penguin civil war could still be done on a smaller scale against Pescaline Pax. But I get the feeling that without going to Acheron, many people will find the conclusion a little hollow. Which therein lies the problem with this series, along with another we'll get into later. The series teased a new area, which, if it doesn't deliver, would be a disappointment. Now, I do think that the Penguins could get away with not going to Palingrad or Acheron in their quests, and then if Acheron does get released, then we can get a standalone quest or something that serves as a tie-in or an epilogue to the Penguins. Kind of like how Zanuck had her, well, first epilogue story in The Mighty Fall. The only major things that we would really need to include would be that the quest is humorous throughout, and that there's some sort of new addition to Penguin Hide and Seek as a reward. Other than that, there are a lot of liberties in how the Penguin menace could be stopped for good. The Elemental Workshop is next, and this series may be the least intrusive to add. The Elemental Workshop series had its first installment released on June 2nd, 2004. It has since had 3 additional installments, with the latest being released on March 1st, 2011. The series revolves around solving complicated puzzles surrounding an interesting use of magic-infused armor. The series started with the elemental runes, but progressed to include Mind, Body, Cosmic, and Chaos rune armor sets. The latest quest teased the existence of a Nature and Astral rune sets, but those doors have laid dormant for over a decade now. Even after these 2 are uncovered though, there's still Law, Death, Blood, and Soul runes to theoretically add into the series, meaning there are at minimum 6 runes to incorporate. We actually have an FAQ that was released after Elemental Workshop 4, and posted to the Runescape forums. Although the forums are no longer around, the questions were archived by the Runescape wiki. Mod Dylan and Mod Mark stated that there were between 3 and 5 additional parts to the Elemental Workshop planned. This means that at its shortest, each quest could incorporate 2 rune types. So Elemental Workshop 5 could use Nature and Astral runes, then 6 could use Law and Death runes, and finally 7 would use Blood and Soul runes. While there's no antagonist per se when it comes to the Elemental Workshop, the series itself more so follows the writings of Vitruvius, the Elemental Metallurgist. Metallurgist? Something. And so it's more of uncovering a massive mystery rather than stopping a bad guy's plans. The biggest problem with continuing the Elemental Workshop, however, is player interest. The series is notorious for its complicated puzzles, and many players can barely be bothered to read dialogue, let alone work out complicated solutions. Unfortunately, the series can't exactly change how it's been operating, and attempting to do so would ruin the identity that this series has. So, what could be done about it? Well, the simplest solution would be to make the elemental armor incredibly good to use. Allowing the set could give good melee and magic bonuses, with some of the later sets scaling up to tier 80 power armor, which could be a budget way for people to have multiple styles without needing a full outfit switch or sacrificing DPS for a hybrid set. Or, outside of combat, we could have the sets have their own special effects, though what niche they could carve out for themselves, I'm not entirely sure on. Maybe we could use necromancy to fully utilize the death, blood, and soul doors, which would require the use of the Well of Souls in order to make these sets. Whatever these armors end up being, what's important is that they fulfill some sort of need or convenience that the game currently lacks. These things are already a massive pain to make, and so they should fulfill some sort of niche, whether that's through combat, rune crafting, or ritual use, that makes it worth making. I can't see this series ending right away, as I do think that this needs 3 quests at a minimum to cover all of the rooms adequately, as well as give each set a bit of room to breathe when released. But this is one of RuneScape's oldest mysteries that still needs to be solved. Hello, Post-Editing Destroyer here, and before we move on, I do want to give a little bit of context concerning recent developments. As many of you are aware, in the recent Runescape Ahead, we were told a lot of new information about the upcoming year and for a lot of 2025, among which are 3 brand new desert quests that also serve to tie up and finish the series. Now, why is that important? Well, probably because there's probably someone that's already made a comment concerning the 4 stories mentioned at the beginning going, actually, we just learned that desert is changed. And to give you a little bit of context behind the scenes, I have been working on these videos for months now. The script was written back in early June, and this video in particular is one of the longer Hotspot videos. So it's taken me a long time to be able to get everything together, get all the clips, make sure everything's edited correctly. And so, while yes, it is honestly really nice that from the Runescape Ahead, it seems as though Jagex is looking at expanding on already existing content, which, you know, was the whole purpose behind this entire discussion series, I also can't make quick changes so fast. This information came out 37 hours before this video is uploaded. So to rewrite, reshoot, and re-edit a significant portion of this video is just not feasible. So rather than talking about a potential expansion to the desert, I'll still keep it as is, as how I originally recorded it. But what I would prefer for a discussion would be what you guys see in terms of what these 3 quests are going to entail. Are they going to be 5th Age or Age of Chaos? Is it going to include the Sanctum? I already had to do a rewrite for this section to include the Sanctum of Rebirth, but that was planned and there was a lot of time ahead of time. So I was able to make adjustments there. Can't do it with 37 hours. So, yeah, just rather than the potential, like, oh, what are the various things if it's gonna happen, let me know about any sort of potential ideas that you guys think will happen within these 3 quests. Because all we really know is that there's 3 quests and it will end with a boss fight with a mascot. And that's about it. So, just want to bring that up forward with you guys. And like I said, even though the information may be a little bit outdated in how it's stated, I'm still going to keep it as is. So, keep that in mind. And now, back to the video. Next up is the Desert questline. The Desert series originally started with the Tourist Trap back on April 14th, 2003. Although the official start of the series was retconned to begin with Stolen Hearts, which replaced Prince Ali's rescue on September 26, 2012. The series would have the most quests associated with it that remains incomplete, chronologically going into Diamond in the Rough and the Jack of Spades, then the aforementioned Tourist Trap, and then Ixthalaurin's Little Helper, Spirits of the Elid, Contact, Dealing with Scarabus, Smoking Kills, Missing My Mummy, Crocodile Tears, Do No Evil, Our Man in the North, and finally, Fight Club, with the final update to the series happening with Menaphos' release on June 5th, 2017. The series has a wide breadth of characters and plot lines, but the main conflict surrounds the plots of a mascot, the Devourer, and her plans for soul corruption. Our many allies include her brother, Ixthalaurin, god of the dead, along with Osman, the now pharaoh of Menaphos, Leela, his daughter, and Ozan, the charming rogue and one of the signature heroes. The last time we checked in on this series, the pharaoh was killed, and Osman usurped the throne. Many of the Menethite gods are now no longer corrupted by a mascot, but a mascot has managed to gain significant power using the Soul Altar. From there, we have no idea where the series goes. While Ixthalaurin has been actively involved in the 6th Age, no other desert content has moved past being in the 5th Age. The only other piece of information we have is that Osman is part of the Council of Saren during the events of the Elder God Wars season, but he played no active role in that series. There's also the recently released Sanctum of Rebirth, but while it is connected to a mascot, it's still uncertain if she's directly responsible for its returning prominence in It could be her doing, or it could be entirely the efforts of Nakatra without any recent influence from a mascot. While it is nice that the desert is getting some representation in recent content, it does not progress the storyline, at least directly, at this point in time. So that just begs the question, where does this series go? Well, at this point, we just need to know what a mascot is doing with the Soul Altar, and possibly the Sanctum of Rebirth as well, and then stopping her plans once and for all. How that will happen, though, is uncertain. Ideally, we have further development of Ozan and Leela's relationship, and perhaps we can get a glimpse of how Osman rules as Pharaoh. We also need to have the bow of Tumakin, being Atmakin, Krondus, and Het finding Scarabus, who's still missing, as Tumakin seems to be instrumental in stopping a mascot. Alidinus could also play a role in stopping a mascot, but that gets tricky with regards to the timeline. If the Desert series is meant to be entirely in the 5th Age, which I think it should be, then Alidinus can't make a direct appearance as she was affected by the Edicts of Guthix. It's also hard to justify bringing her in now, as the edicts were reinstated by the World Guardian, so the only way for her to intervene would be through an avatar of some kind, which maybe she could do through Leela? Though that's pure speculation. The 5th Age question is also important with regards to adding the Sanctum's placement in the timeline. While Necromancy's placement is not concrete, it makes the most sense to be after the Elder Gods saga, as our character's reaction to other necromancers makes little sense should it be before the Elder Gods are dealt with. Adding the Sanctum would necessitate at least bringing the Desert series to the 6th Age, if not the Age of Chaos, which, while certainly doable, especially if a mascot is also trying to find Scarabus, like the Bow of Tumakin, I can't help but feel a little whiplash that the timeline for the series finale suddenly jumps over 10 years of in-game time. As far as rewards go, there's a few things that could be developed on. There could be some sort of Slayer boost, as the Order of Slayers originated and were mostly corrupted by a mascot's influence. Certain things that could be added would be a boost to damage for certain Slayer creatures, or perhaps a better effectiveness for Ushaptis. There's expanding the facilities in Menaphos, of which I have one idea, but I'll delve into that a little more in a future Hotspot video. If we look at the Sanctums rewards for inspiration, we could also get some more prayers for the standard prayer book, to make it a more viable option compared to curses. Honestly, there's a lot that we could get for this conclusion, and it'll be exciting once we finally get there. But there is still one final series that we'll be touching on today. The Gnome series is the final storyline that we are going to discuss today. This series begins with Tree Gnome Village, released on July 23rd, 2002, which is the oldest series out of the 4. The series continued with the Grand Tree, Monkey Madness, the Eyes of Gluffery, the Path of Gluffery, and finally, the Prisoner of Gluffery, which was released on February 9th, 2011, and the series has been quiet ever since. The plot follows two separate gnomes with similar names, Glow and Gluffery. Glow made alliances and pacts with the monkeys on Apatol, and has used multiple demons to try to kill us. His main concern has been with the Tree Gnome stronghold, though there is speculation that he is aligned with Gluffery. Speaking of which, Gluffery is a powerful illusionist who murdered the silver spirit tree Argento, and founded the gnome city of Arposandra, and is considered the main antagonist of the series. The gnomes have been sprinkled into various content throughout the years, from representatives being misled by the Red Axe, to mending relations with the Kriz clan in Prifdinnis, to the leader of Arposandra, Glock, being part of Saren's council. Yet despite them being tangentially related to other series, we've never had a proper continuation of the exploits of either Glow or Gluffery. Why? Well, the gnomes are unfortunately the victims of two separate issues that prevent quests from continuing: promises of a large area, and lack of player interest. The next quest in the series looks to introduce Arposandra, the hidden gnome city, into the game. But just like the penguins, this means that Jagex would need to develop an entire city with things to do. However, unlike the penguins, there's no getting around visiting Arposandra. The next quest teased an entrance into the city, and the ending to Prisoner of Gluffery seemed to imply that the city would be our next destination, so there's no weaseling out of introducing it, unlike Acheron. The other problem is that every time the gnomes are pulled for player interest, they've never gotten a lot of attention. Gnomes are usually in the middle of the road in terms of interest when it comes to pulling, not neglected, but not desired either. This makes putting the effort into continuing the series tricky, as Jagex also needs to gauge player interest when developing content. If players are just not interested, then there's no point in spending dev time on it. I've seen players offer some suggestions about overcoming the Arposandra question, like, say, the city was destroyed, and we can use archaeology to uncover what happened, but that unfortunately makes no sense in continuity. We have representatives from Arposandra in various cities. Even the leader of the city was part of Saren's council, which means there is an active population being represented. So the city still does exist and is still around, we just don't have the ability to go there. What's even worse is that Old School's first quest, beyond the 2007 backups, was Monkey Madness 2. While not directly involved with the gnomes, it does finish off Glow's story, which makes it a part of the gnome storyline. So even Old School's gotten more recent gnome story than us. I do not envy Jagex regarding the question of should they just rip the bandage off when it comes to Arposandra. I understand that even if the city were to be destroyed over the course of the quest, there still needs to be time and effort to model at least the part of the city we would be interacting with over the course of a new gnome quest. And while it would be the simplest way to make the city destroyed or otherwise inaccessible after the quest, and would at least solve the issue of populating the city with content, I also know that so many players would be angry and upset that we waited so long to get to Arpalsandra, only to barely spend any time there. So it's incredibly unfortunate that we're in the position that we are in. A major piece of content that has lukewarm anticipation, but high expectations. So those are the 4 unresolved quest lines that we still need to complete. What are your thoughts? Is there anything you'd like to see in some of these quest lines? Do you disagree on a quest line that I excluded from this list? Do you think it's likely Jagex will return to finish any of these old plot lines? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video. So, until next time everyone, take care.